Hello, I'm James.
Hi, I'm Jimmy.
Welcome to A Job Done Well.
The podcast about the world of work and how to improve the daily grind.
Hi, we've got a couple of interviews coming up, including this one that were recorded remotely, and the sound quality isn't quite up to our usual standards. We will continue to test and learn and find ways to improve the sound quality of interviews, but we thought the content and insights these interviews have are excellent, and we don't think it will really spoil your enjoyment. So we wanted to still share them with you, but we thought it was worth mentioning up front so you don't spend the first 5 minutes thinking there's something wrong with your headphones. Anyway, on with the show.
Right, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, James?
Very good, thank you very much. Got something slightly different for you today.
Yeah, we are very, very lucky to have an expert. And when I say expert, I actually,
expert.
We call ourselves experts and we call ourselves gurus. And that's us overstating things, but we genuinely have an expert and a guru in artificial intelligence with us today. So we are very lucky to welcome Alex Alexander. Hi, Alex.
Hello, I'm flattered. And first of all, thank you for having me. And as a podcast co-host for Beyond the Tech podcast, it feels really strange for me to be a guest today and not ask any questions. So if I misbehave and try to ask questions, then please stop me.
Effectively, we've got 3 podcast hosts. What could possibly go wrong?
Exactly.
But Alex, we know a bit about your background, your expertise. You advise companies, governments, all sorts on this subject. So just for the benefit of the listeners, do you want to give us a quick rundown of your experience? But just to give a flavour of what we're going to cover off today, we're going to focus a little bit on education. What do we mean when we talk about AI and Gen AI in particular? We're going to explore the things that work and things that don't work. And you're going to also help us with some advice on how you can get going and how you can unlock the power of AI. But first, for our listeners, tell them, why should we be listening to you about this? What's your background?
Yeah, fantastic. So first of all, I've been in the tech space for too long, perhaps over 2 decades now. And it's been quite a journey. I've had the pleasure of leading technology teams for some of the world's most renowned companies. In UK, I worked for likes of Sainsbury's and Barclays Bank. I worked for Walmart in the US, Xoots, Net-a-Porter, the online fashion retailer in Italy, Emirates Group in Dubai, and Advento Group, the global marketplace in Spain, and a few others. And I've been very lucky that these roles have taken me to 7 countries across 3 continents, which has been an amazing experience. But most importantly, my roles have always been about creating something new, often a new digital product across industries such as consumer retail or retail banking or even aviation. And actually, it was this passion for creating something new that led me to set up my own generative AI tech startup called Xoots last summer. But I'm not new to AI. I've got over a decade of experience in the field of AI, integrating AI into customer interactions, enabling personalizations, but also integrating into operations and supply chain and improving operational efficiency. So really glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. We're very lucky to have you. So just to start off with, I know this is really basic stuff for you, but some of our audience will not have come across Gen AI particularly, or lots of people are pretending they understand it at the moment. It's a great
buzzword du jour.
It is buzzword du jour, and so people don't have to pretend to understand it. What do you mean by Gen AI, and how does it work?
Absolutely. I think this is true because there's a lot of buzzwords around. But I would say generative AI is pretty fascinating, and because it's made up of these massive, big data-driven models that are behind the generative AI technology as we know it, and they're capable of creating content. And when I say content, I mean a wide range of content from images to videos to text to music. It's like having a super creative assistant that can generate all sorts of things. And it excels at creating this diverse content across many industries. So think about it as art industry, content creation, media industry, music industry, drug discovery, software development, which is obviously one of the areas that I've worked on as well. So many, many industries. And often when we talk about generative AI, we think about tools such as OpenAI's ChatGPT or Google's Bard are a perfect example of the power of generative AI because they generate human-like text, which opens up, possibilities for creating content, improving customer service, and a lot more. So if I had to sum it up, I would say generative AI is a transformative technology and is changing the way that we create and also interact with content. And it's really excited to see, where it's going to head in terms of evolution of it in the next few months and few years.
So at the risk of saying something really stupid, Alex, heaven forbid, but so generative AI is generating stuff as opposed to AI, which is not necessarily generating stuff?
Well, there is a distinct difference between, traditional AI, I call it, versus generative AI. And the way I would describe it, and by the way, James, it's a great question because often people get confused, is that traditional AI uses machine learning algorithms to analyze data for tasks like market predictions. And that could be for financial market predictions, that could be for healthcare, could be for manufacturing, and for things like fraud detections and medical diagnosis. And machine learning, which is a subset of AI, or often referred to as ML, so shortened for machine learning, is probably the most common form of AI we see across various industries. So when you see product recommendations on an e-commerce site, they're generated through machine learning. If you're seeing social media feeds being curated, that's machine learning. So it's great for all kinds of examples that I mentioned, but also including fraud detection and supply chain management. On the other hand, generative AI, as you rightly mentioned, James, is about creating content. It generates content. And as I said, content means images, videos, text, and even music. So its application obviously touches many industries from content creation, media, music, drug discovery, software development, and many others. But a lot of focus and headlines, I would say, has been on the subset of AI called large language models or generative AI. And these generative AI tools like ChatGPT, when we refer to AI, often people think that's AI, but actually it is really important to remember that traditional AI has been around for over 50 years and doing some amazing work. So we should not forget that AI isn't new. Generative AI is new. And one interesting, KPI to just put it into perspective and understand the scale of it, ChatGPT-4, which is one of these so-called large language models, has about 1 trillion parameters. That shows the scale and the size of the power of the data that it has. And a human brain has around 100 trillion parameters. So perhaps it's not long before these large language models are catching up with humans, but it's not quite that sequential because humans can do and continue to do things that AI cannot do. So in a nutshell, all of these technologies fall under AI umbrella, but they have different focuses and different applications.
So just sorry, because I'm intrigued, the history lesson. So you say it's been around for 50 years. So can you give us some examples of things which maybe we grew up with that we don't really think of as being AI, but in actual fact were? So what was happening in the 90s? What was happening in the 2000s?
Well, I mean, we've been all familiar with the Amazon website or other websites that we go to that when we go for the second and third time, it recognizes us. So that's personalization. And the examples of, using AI. But also even, some elements of the generative AI, when we do Google Translate, that is actually using generative AI. But of course, Google Translate has been around for many years, but it was the early form of generative AI. So all of these technologies in some shape or form have been around. Another example of it, dynamic pricing, is using generative AI. But traditional AI is about algorithms that predict, where generative AI is about content. creation.
Yeah, and I think so. Our experience with AI would have been in prediction. So, or we both used to work in insurance, but making a prediction on whether or not something is fraudulent, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fraud detection is a key example of traditional AI, which we have seen for many years.
So, one of the things that gets me is people listen to all the hype about AI and think, well, it's a machine, therefore it must be right. In actual fact, it's a prediction. It's not a statement of fact. A lot of this is about predictions. Have I got it right?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it very much depends on the algorithm, very much depends on the data that is used to build this prediction. Absolutely. At the end of the day, a human has trained these models and written the predictions. Yeah, so you're absolutely correct that it very much depends on the algorithms and the data that is consumed.
Just to start off, though, Alex, at a headline level, AI is going to take over the world. It's the end of civilization. I guess, what is the potential of AI?
Well, in my view, AI is very transformative. But many people say that AI is going to replace all jobs and take away all the skills that we have. I'm an AI practitioner, which is not of that view. My view is that AI will enhance and augment our capabilities, our jobs, hence our productivity. So I'm a great believer of augmentation. So human intelligence combined with AI to create this exponential transformation capability that this new technology is capable of providing. But it's not about replacing, it's about augmenting and enhancing.
And I think that's really interesting. So when I have used AI tools, so for example, on our websites for this podcast, you will see there are lots of images and they're all generative AI. They all come from a system called Midjourney, but it's about the interaction between the human and the AI, I think, which is what gets you the best outcome rather than just expecting the AI to give you the best thing. It's a bit like, now I'm going to be really nerdy, but computer chess. A computer will always beat a man at chess now, but a human-computer partnership is invariably a much more formidable chess playing machine. So it's about the combination between the human and the machine, I think, which is where the real power is.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, James, on that one. And the key to success in the future of, skills, jobs, is about using AI as an enhancer, as an augmentation. And it's not about competing with AI. It's about working with AI to enhance what we do and become better in our jobs and become far more productive.
The show you're listening to right now brings you insights to help you improve performance and enjoyment of work.
It takes a long time to produce, but we think it's well worth it. It's all in the name of helping you getting the job done well.
All we ask in return is that you share the link to this show with someone that you think would benefit from it. And if you haven't already, click on follow wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
But just to get in ahead of James saying this, to quote Public Enemy from back in the day, don't believe the hype. We've heard machine learning, robotics, big data. Is this just the next big thing from the tech world?
Yeah, great question. And I've also seen, just like you, a lot of hype over the years around various technologies. And many of them never materialize, or some of them took a long time to become reality. But generative AI, it feels different. I mean, just to put it into context, it took ChatGPT, when it was launched in November 2022. And I remember that time precisely because I was curious and I was not convinced. But it hit 1 million users within the first 5 days. And it took Netflix, for example, 2.5 years to reach the same milestone. And it's this kind of rapid adoption, but also rapid change of this technology, because it's not just that version of ChatGPT that we are using now. There's been many, many other iterations of that since then. And it is formative because it makes us more productive. And it's not just for our personal use, but also for professional work for industries such as healthcare, finance, journalism, and education. So I would say it is different, but we also have to be cautious about using it because it's not easy to adopt it properly because it requires good data management, and it also needs to make sure that we are aware of the ethical use of AI as well.
Well, let's come back to the adoption in a moment. But can you give us some good examples, some use cases of where generative AI is working and has delivered transformative change? I mean, some of the stuff that you've seen, some of the stuff that you're doing at Xoots, and maybe some examples of where it hasn't done quite as good a job.
Yeah, great. So let me sort of share with you a case study from my own experience with Xoots and one of our products, Talent X, because we built an AI-powered talent interviewing platform. And we believe this platform will transform the talent selection process because we believe it's going to make it, 1,000 times more efficient, but also less biased and more transparent, but also at the same time, creating a more enjoyable experience for the candidates as well. So we use AI to effectively do the interviewing, so it creates efficiency, accuracy, and we've seen the outcome of that in terms of not only speed, but also quality of the candidates and that position that it gets in terms of finding the right talent that you're looking for. But probably a second example that I can mention, again, is to do with Xoots, is actually our team. Because as I mentioned, that we set up the startup less than a year ago, so last summer, but we have a team of 100 employees, but only 6 of us are humans. And the other 94 is what we call AI agents. And they handle various tasks for us, from taking meeting notes to booking appointments with client appointments, doing research for us, and doing all of these things so that the 6 humans are a lot more productive in terms of what we do. In fact, some of the software development that we've done it at half the time that it would have taken me pre-generative AI. So all the estimates that we did at the beginning of this journey is actually in practice is half, just because we're using human and AI together to augment the work that we are doing. In terms of other examples, AI...
Sorry, Alex, just to pause 1 second, just on your Talent X example, only because I've seen it. You took me through it. I mean, I always hate interviewing. I don't have the patience for it. I decide within 30 seconds whether I like someone or not. And so I was intrigued by your platform for 2 reasons. One, because it does a job I don't like doing. I don't think I'm very good at. But also, it was really clever in that you had identified the key skills and the answers and the things that people should say to get a really good answer. So it would say, I'm hiring for a complaints handler. Here's the key things I need for a complaints handler. The person's interviewed by the AI via a video chat, and then it dispassionately and objectively evaluates their interview, rather than me, after 30 seconds, I decide that person's boring, I don't want to carry on. So I think it will definitely, in that example, be much more efficient and give a better quality outcome.
So I haven't seen it, so I'm talking from a position of ignorance, but that doesn't normally stop me. Surely then, Alex, with something like that, it's only as good as the information that is put into it. So is it really interesting you say it removes bias? Is it not as biased as the person who has given it the information from the get-go on what a good candidate looks like, or is there a way around that?
Well, I think it's a great question. So let me just try to break down the answer. Yeah. But first of all, it's back to human and AI working together.
Yeah.
So humans saying, what is the best practice type questions and best practice answer for a certain question? Because that's not bias. It's just, this is based on years of experience that, whether it is somebody, a practitioner in technology or operations or compliance, whatever it may be. So that's just understanding what is good questions and how do we test the knowledge. But AI uses its knowledge of that information to analyze the answers that the candidate gives verbally. And that's another important point as well, because the candidate can answer the questions in one of 65 languages if they want to. But again, to reduce the bias of accents, languages, AI will only evaluate speech to text, i.e. the translated voice into English language, so it doesn't create a bias towards the languages or accents. So it's the power of human and AI working together to say what is a good answer, and AI being able to analyze that and then transcribe that in terms of this was the question, this was the answer that I was given, and this is my analysis of whether the answer fit the mark.
It's a bit like the story about women playing in orchestras. So when they were hiring for orchestras, they used to do performances, and the number of women who got through to play in the orchestras was actually quite low. What they then moved to was a position where you did the performance, but you played behind a curtain so people couldn't see you. And then when they played in that scenario, many more women went into orchestras, because by putting the curtain in front, you took the bias out. People couldn't see it was a man playing. So that sounds a bit random, but in a lot of ways, that's very similar to what you're saying.
Exactly.
So you're putting the criteria, but be very, you could put in by this criteria, but you're less likely to do that.
Exactly. And I mean, your analogy or say your example is very relevant, because another thing that we do to eliminate or reduce that bias is that, everything with a candidate starts with a CV. And of course, AI will want to see the CV, but we will only allow AI to see the CV after it analyzed the answers after the interview, because we don't want it to create a bias towards the company that the person had worked in, the location that they live in, or the languages they speak or they don't speak. So as a result, there is a sequence by which we can do things, which actually is the opposite of how humans, perform that activity, to reduce the bias and create a transparency.
But I think the example is a good one, because I think one of your key points here, Alex, is it's the link between the human and the AI and how they work in synergy that is important. So in your example, I like interviewing. That doesn't mean that I don't have to have any input into this, that the AI is just going to find me 5 great, customer service agents. It's not going to do that. I've got to teach it and work with it on what good looks like first. And then once it's got that, it can then churn through lots of interviews without bias and give me objective outcomes. But it doesn't naturally know what a good customer service agent looks like in my environment, in my context.
You're absolutely correct. You define it exactly and precisely, because what then AI does can scale this, can scale what you described in terms of processing thousands of candidates a minute, to do that at a scale, at a level of efficiency that humans cannot do, and produce the most consistent set of transcript of interview notes that humans are not able to produce, because it's just very objective, just because it's processed the answers based on what you just described to come up with what good looks like. So that's exactly it. And we have seen in the last 2.5 months that we've used it live, and of course several months of using it in pilot, that it saves in excess of £3,000 per hire. But it's not just the cost savings, it's actually the better experience, the more transparency and so on, that is also great as well. So faster time, 1,000 times faster than humans, but also a better experience.
And that's when, that's a great story, but that's when AI works well. But part of the trouble is, at the moment, everyone's getting involved in AI, and every organization's got their AI projects. And one of my pet hates at the moment is chatbots that just seem to be there to defeat you and stop you from getting answers and stop you from getting through to the people. What's going wrong with those? Why are they so frustrating to work with?
Yeah, just like you, I get frustrated with those, but I think it's just to do with poor training of those AI models. And in fact, Gen AI itself is not without its hiccups. And you asked earlier about what's the examples of failures of Gen AI. A notable example that I saw back in January of this year was with the parcel delivery, DPT. They had to disable part of their online support chatbot after it started insulting the customers. So can you imagine that for customer service? So the chatbot that was used to answer questions for the customers started behaving unexpectedly after an update that DPD had done. So it not only just didn't answer the questions, it started swearing at customers, and it also criticized the companies. So DPD took it down. So these are, fundamental issues in not properly training the AI models, because AI works in a repeatable way once it's trained based on a set of data and business's context for those customers. So if those things are not in place, accidents such as this will happen.
The tool is really powerful, but you need to be very careful because it will do exactly what you ask it to do. I mean, the story, I think I've got this right. I think it was Microsoft. They built a tweet bot, and they gave this thing the challenge of getting as many followers as possible in as short a time as it could. And it was remarkably successful. And all it did was started to tweet a load of Nazi homophobic stuff. Got lots and lots of followers, but it wasn't quite what Microsoft had in plan. But it did exactly what they wanted it to do. So it might as well be a chainsaw, a very powerful thing, but it needs to be handled with care. That's really what you're saying to us.
Exactly. I mean, I'm going to use a term which may sound a bit geeky, but I will explain it. So everybody refers to this notion of prompt engineering. And all that means is that you've got to guide the AI to say how to behave, provided the context, provided with, what are the things that you want it to do and in what way. So what is the tone of voice for the business? How customer interactions need to be actioned? How do you deal with the angry customer based on what they put into the text? So Jimmy was sort of saying that you get frustrated, that sometimes you may actually want to get an answer. And I think AI needs to be trained to say at some point, you need to pass it to a human so that the customer does not get frustrated. But all of that is to do with that training that needs to be done. If they haven't done that, they haven't provided it with a tone of voice and how to deal with customers, then problems like this will happen. So you're correct, James.
Now, Alex, many of our listeners will either be on the AI journey or thinking about the AI journey. Everyone has to do that at the moment. It's like James said, it's the buzzword du jour. What would be the advice that you would recommend people follow in order to help set themselves up for success on this journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to wrap up this particular topic, I mean, everybody needs to know that generative AI is a bit like a Swiss Army knife. It's good for a lot of things, but not necessarily great at everything. So we have to be careful, and we have to make sure that we pick the right tool for the job. So whether that job is about we want to differentiate ourselves from others, well, you need to make sure that you train your AI to be differentiating, and that means high quality business data. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is that you need to know exactly what data and how accurate that data is that you feed into AI, because Gen AI needs data. That's how you can process. So you've got to be careful, super careful about risk of reputational damage. So that's super important. And of course, if you haven't got any data governance in your organization, you have to create it, because without data governance, wrong data could get fed into Gen AI, and that obviously could have legal repercussions and reputational damage. So it's so important to know that. And the third thing is that generative AI models, as we know it, they're effectively generalist. So you need to make them specialist, and a specialist for what you want them to do for the company purpose that they have. So these big models are generalists. So you really need to make sure that you train them, you fine-tune them to do what you want them to do based on your company's data and your company's context. And I would say the fourth thing is that you've got to get your, if there is something to do with customer, you need to have the holistic customer data ready. Because if your data is split across 50 systems, but 5 of those systems you don't have access to, well, that's a failure point, because AI needs to have all of those data points, because it doesn't know for those data points that you are not providing it what issues that a customer may have had that the AI will not be aware of. And the last thing is AI is about creating a cross-functional team. So you need to get your team mobilized, and you need to make sure that they are educated on AI, what it is good at and also what is not good at. So I think that's the important part.
But then if I was to, so there were about 5 or 6 things you said there, if I was to summarize it down to 2, just because I'm a man who can't hold too many thoughts, but the one is you really do need to get your company data in a place where it can look at it. And then the second one is the human interaction with that, but you need to be very skilled at being clear about what you want the AI to do. Because if you're not clear about what you want it to do, or you don't have the data, you're on a little bit of a hiding to nothing, or you'll get a whole load of unforeseen consequences.
Correct.
I think it's interesting, Alex. Your advice is very, very clear and very compelling in terms of how you go about doing it. I think it'd be fascinating to know how many of these companies that are already on the AI journey have actually followed some of your advice. Because in my experience, all the organisations I work for or worked with, and it's been quite a lot, none of them have their data straight. Yeah, I bet a lot of them are on the AI journey. So the risk being, on one end, you're slightly suboptimal in how you implement it and the benefits you get from it, and then we end up with another false dawn of this is how technology can change our lives. Or at the other end, you could make a complete mess of things and expose your company to significant risk by going down this route.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a Peter Drucker quote. Hang on, see if I can remember it. There is nothing quite so useless as doing the wrong thing more efficiently. It's got the real power.
Yeah.
But unless you're really clear about what you want to be done, you're on like I said, hiding to nothing.
Yeah, I think spot on, because having the right data and actually asking AI to operate within the context of your organization, what is it that you wanted to do? But I know you summarized it very well, James, in terms of 5 points that I mentioned into 2 points, which are actually correct. But actually, I can narrow it down to 1 point.
Oh, go on. Even better. I like it.
That'll work for me now.
To really make use of generative AI, you need to have data quality as a priority, because generative AI without high quality data is just fluff. That's my one line saying what is the main thing that everybody needs to know.
Which will be interesting, because how many organisations have good high quality data?
Well, no, I've seen 30 odd years of management fluff. I think it'll fit right in. So, so given that, so I've worked for 6 organisations. I think 2 or 3 of them might have the data in a place that could use it. So my sample is half organisations don't have the data. However, there will be enormous political pressure in all organisations to get something going with AI. So if you're in the position whereby you've been tasked with getting something going and the organisation doesn't have the data, because it's a big old job to sort that out, what can organisations sensibly do that will prove that it's useful? Where would you cut in? So there's the recruitment application we've been talking about, and I can see that. Is there anything else you think organisations should think about?
Yeah, I think it narrows down the experiment. I think you really need to know what data, however narrow they may be, that could help you. But of course, organizations that are in medical care should avoid, if they haven't got the data, they should avoid doing any experimentation, because we're dealing with patients' data and patients' records. But, it is possible to experiment in a small scale for the areas that have no ethical implications, that have no reputational damage implications. So you really need to narrow down your scope to based on the data that you can reliably say it is of high quality. So it just narrows down. So it could be things such as supply chain optimization, looking at detection of faulty items. So avoid things which has a direct interactions with the customer, but more focused on the back end or operational aspects. I would say that could be one area that to look at. And I think in supply chain, there are lots of things such as logistic planning, damage detection that doesn't directly interact with the customer. So I think it just depends on how much of your data is of high quality, and then narrow down your experiment to that.
Super.
Thanks, Alex. Well, I think you two have competed for the quote of the day, which was either James's buzzword du jour or Alex's without high quality data, this is just fluff. Thank you, Alex, for taking us through a quick canter through generative AI and a little bit of education on what it actually is, some examples and some fantastic advice on how you can set yourselves up for success on this potentially life-changing new technology. Usually at this point, we say to people, if they want to know more, get in touch and we'll help them. On this occasion, we will say, if you want to know more about AI, then get in touch with Alex, and we'll put the contact details in the blurb for the episode, because he's the expert.
However, if you want to know more about management fluff, we're quite good at that.
We can do the management fluff bits.
I think the three of us then can do a great job together then.
Exactly. It was really interesting.
Thanks very much, Alex.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. Great stuff. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast, from purpose to corporate jargon,
but always focused on one thing: getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So, if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
if your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiraling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com
or james@ajobdonewell.com.